The Meridian hummed through hyperspace like a metallic lullaby, its fusion engines creating a rhythm that most humans found soothing. Commander Zara Velenth found it about as relaxing as a neutron star collision. Her elongated ears, each nearly twice the length of a human's and tapering to delicate points, twitched involuntarily as they picked up the emotional residue still clinging to her uniform. 3 days of negotiations with the Crimson Syndicate had left her empathic receptors completely fried. Every hostile thought, every spike of greed and barely contained violence from those red-scaled pirates had channeled directly through her auditory cortex like psychic feedback. "Note to self," she muttered in heavily accented Standard, stumbling slightly as the ship's artificial gravity fluctuated. "Next time the Ethereal Council assigns me to babysit trigger-happy space pirates, I'm calling in sick with temporal flu." The corridor stretched endlessly before her, all brushed steel and soft blue lighting designed to mimic Earth's twilight hours. Humans and their obsession with replicating their homeworld everywhere they went. Though she had to admit, after spending 72 hours in a ship that smelled like sulfur and recycled aggression, the Meridian felt positively therapeutic. Her ears drooped as another wave of exhaustion hit her. The universal translator implanted behind her left ear canal buzzed with fatigue-induced static, occasionally spitting out fragments of the day's conversations. "Thermal detonators," it whispered then, "Cargo Bay 7. Followed by what sounded suspiciously like a recipe for synthetic caffeine. Zara paused at an intersection, consulting the holographic ship schematic that materialized from her wrist communicator. The diplomatic quarters should be just ahead, past the hydroponics bay and the zero-G gymnasium, where she could already hear someone grunting through what humans euphemistically called exercise. "Deck 7, Section 12, she read aloud, her voice echoing off the walls. Or was it Deck 12, Section 7? The symbols swam before her eyes like angry quantum particles. By the void's empty heart, I should have paid more attention during the orientation. She turned left down a corridor that looked identical to every other corridor on this geometrically challenged vessel. Humans apparently believed that if you painted everything the same shade of metallic beige, people would find their way through sheer determination. It was like navigation by bureaucratic stubbornness. Her ears perked up slightly as she caught the scent of something familiar, coffee, but not the synthetic stuff that tasted like liquid regret. Real coffee, with beans that had actually seen soil and sunshine. The aroma seemed to be coming from behind a door marked with symbols that her translator was too tired to decode properly. "This has to be it," she mumbled, pressing her palm against the access panel. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a quarters that was definitely not regulation diplomatic housing. The room was smaller than expected, cluttered with books, actual paper books, not data tablets, and scientific equipment that hummed quietly in the corners. A holographic star chart rotated slowly near the ceiling, casting gentle points of light across walls lined with what appeared to be pressed flowers from a dozen different worlds. But none of that mattered, because there, in the center of the room, sat the most inviting bed she'd seen in months. Not the hard, sterile slab that diplomatic protocols demanded, but something soft and rumpled, with blankets that looked like they'd been chosen for comfort rather than regulation compliance. "Finally," Zara sighed, her ears finally relaxing as the ambient emotional noise of the ship seemed to fade. "A place that doesn't feel like a medical facility." She didn't bother removing her boots or her diplomatic sash. She simply collapsed onto the bed, her long ears spreading across the pillow like silver wings. The blanket smelled like that wonderful coffee, mixed with something else, something warm and alive that her exhausted mind couldn't quite identify. For the first time in 3 days, the constant chatter of other people's emotions faded to a whisper. Her ears, finally free from the assault of psychic noise, began to close like flower petals in the artificial night. "Just a few minutes," she whispered into the pillow, already half asleep. just until my translator stops hiccuping. Somewhere in the distance, the Meridian continued its journey through hyperspace, carrying its cargo of humans, one extremely tired ethereal diplomat, and the beginning of a misunderstanding that would prove to be the most fortunate accident in recent interstellar history. The last thing Zara heard before sleep claimed her was the soft whisper of recycled air, and the distant sound of someone in the laboratory 3 decks down, muttering about crystalline organisms and their completely unreasonable reproductive cycles. Dr. Marcus Chen stumbled through the corridors of the Meridian like a man who'd been wrestling with quantum equations for 18 straight hours, which, coincidentally, he had. His lab coat hung askew, one pocket bulging with sample containers that clinked softly with each step, and his hair stood at angles that defied both gravity and good sense. Crystalline organisms, he muttered to himself, rubbing his eyes. Why couldn't they just reproduce normally, like rabbits, or bacteria, or literally anything that doesn't require a PhD in theoretical physics to understand? The ship's corridors blurred past him in a haze of exhaustion and artificial lighting. He'd been so close to a breakthrough with the samples from Kepler 442b, those strange crystal formations that seemed to grow in response to electromagnetic fields. Just a few more hours and he might have figured out their reproductive cycle, but his body had finally staged a rebellion against caffeine and determination. His quarters were just ahead, promising blessed unconsciousness and maybe, if he was lucky, dreams that didn't involve sentient minerals with commitment issues. Marcus pressed his palm against the access panel, waiting for the familiar hiss of the door. "Computer, dim lights to 15%, he called out, already reaching for his jacket's zipper. "And remind me tomorrow to send a formal complaint to the universe about organisms that—" He froze. There in his bed, curled up like a cat who'd found the perfect sunbeam, was a woman, an alien woman, with ears that stretched nearly to her shoulders and were currently twitching slightly in her sleep. Marcus's first coherent thought was that he'd finally succumbed to sleep deprivation-induced hallucinations. His second was that if he was hallucinating, his subconscious had remarkably good taste in imaginary aliens. His third was pure, undiluted panic. "Oh no," he whispered, backing toward the door. "Oh no, oh no, oh no. I've kidnapped a diplomat. I'm going to be court-martialed. They're going to space me. Do they still space people? Maybe they'll just exile me to a mining colony where I can contemplate my life choices while dodging toxic gas clouds." The woman stirred, her ears twitching like butterfly wings. Marcus held his breath, pressing himself against the wall as if he could somehow become one with the bulkhead through sheer terror. Her eyes opened, large, violet-hued eyes that seemed to hold the depth of nebulae, and focused on him with the slow confusion of someone emerging from deep sleep. "Good morning," she said in accented standard, her voice carrying musical undertones that made Marcus's universal translator hum with appreciation. "I assume this is some sort of human greeting ritual involving frozen panic." "I'm sorry," Marcus blurted out, his hands flying up in what he hoped was a universally recognized gesture of non-aggression. "I didn't mean to. I don't know how you got here. I was just trying to sleep, and would you like some coffee? I have 17 different varieties. 18 if you count the experimental blend that may or may not be technically legal in this sector." She sat up slowly, her long ears adjusting to catch the ambient sounds of the ship. "Coffee sounds lovely, but first, could you explain why you're apologizing to me when I'm the one who appears to have invaded your sleeping space?" Marcus blinked. "Because you're a diplomat. And I'm pretty sure accidentally sharing quarters with diplomatic personnel violates at least 14 interstellar treaties." "Ah," she swung her legs over the edge of the bed, her movements graceful despite having just woken up. "Well, I'm not technically a diplomat until I'm on duty, and right now I'm just a very confused alien who seems to have made a navigation error." "Navigation error," Marcus repeated, latching onto the phrase like a lifeline. "Right, that's That's much better than kidnapping. Navigation errors are probably only a minor infraction, maybe just a fine or remedial spatial awareness training. She tilted her head, and Marcus noticed how her ears moved independently, like satellite dishes tracking different signals. Are you always this panic-prone, or is this a special occasion? Special occasion, Marcus admitted, running a hand through his disheveled hair. I don't usually find beautiful alien women in my bed. I mean, I don't usually find anyone in my bed. I mean, not that I'm implying anything about, oh, stellar cores, I'm making this worse, aren't I? A smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. Your translator seems to be malfunctioning. It keeps converting your nervous rambling into what sounds like ancient ethereal poetry about the sacred union of sleeping spirits. Marcus felt his face heat up. I'm going to have a very stern conversation with that translator later, possibly involving a plasma torch. I'm Commander Zara Velenth, she said, extending a hand. And you're Dr. Marcus Chen, according to the nameplate on your desk. Also according to the 47 scientific journals scattered around your quarters, the 12 coffee cups in various states of abandonment, and the fact that you've been muttering about crystalline organisms for the past 10 minutes. Marcus shook her hand, noting how her skin felt surprisingly warm. You heard that. I thought I was being quiet. My ears are sensitive, Zara said, gesturing to her distinctive appendages. They pick up more than just sound. Emotions, intentions, the general psychic noise that most beings generate. It's actually quite peaceful in here. Your quarters have a very calm resonance. That's probably just the white noise generator, Marcus said, then immediately felt foolish. I mean, it's not that I think you're lying about psychic ear sensitivity. I believe you. I've seen stranger things. Last week I discovered a plant that communicates through interpretive dance. Zara's ears perked up with interest. Really? What did it say? Mostly complaints about the lighting. Apparently, our full-spectrum lamps are too intense for proper artistic expression. For the first time since waking up, Zara laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. I think I'm going to enjoy working with humans. The diplomatic quarters assigned to Zara turned out to be everything she'd expected, and nothing she'd hoped for. Sterile white walls, regulation furniture positioned at precisely measured intervals, and an atmosphere recycler that hummed with the enthusiasm of a dying quantum computer. Home sweet home, she muttered, dropping her travel kit onto the narrow bed. The mattress was so firm it might have been a compressed neutron star. She pressed her palm against it experimentally. I've slept on asteroids with more give than this. Her ears immediately began picking up the emotional overflow from neighboring quarters. Lieutenant Rodriguez in the next room was homesick for his grandmother's enchiladas. 2 doors down, Ensign Kim was having an anxiety attack about her upcoming piloting exam. Across the corridor, someone was experiencing what could only be described as romantic frustration involving a holographic companion and a broken emotion simulator. This is going to be a long mission, Zara sighed, pulling a pillow over her head. It helped about as much as using a tea strainer to stop a solar flare. The next morning in the mess hall, she encountered her first real challenge. Human breakfast food. The replicator offered her something called pancakes that looked like miniature landing pads covered in brown syrup. It's maple syrup, Marcus explained, sliding into the seat across from her with his own tray. From trees on Earth. Completely natural, assuming you consider genetic modification and industrial processing natural. Trees that bleed sweet liquid, Zara mused, taking a cautious bite. How wonderfully disturbing. On my homeworld, we'd consider this either a delicacy or a sign of planetary plague. How's it taste? Like concentrated sunshine mixed with the dreams of small children, she said, then took another bite. I think I'm addicted already. Marcus grinned. Wait until you try bacon. It's made from an earth animal that humans have been obsessing over for millennia. There are entire philosophical debates about its proper preparation. Fascinating. Do you have any foods that don't require existential discussion? Well, there's oatmeal, but that tends to inspire more despair than philosophy. Their conversation was interrupted by the ship's emergency klaxon, followed by Captain Morrison's voice over the intercom. All hands to emergency stations. We have a malfunctioning gravity simulator in Recreation Deck C. Repeat, malfunctioning gravity simulator. Gravity simulator, Zara asked, already standing. The crew gets restless without proper exercise, Marcus explained, heading for the door. So we have chambers that can simulate different gravitational conditions. Earth normal, Mars light, Jupiter crushing death from space. You know, for variety. They arrived at Recreation Deck C to find chaos. The gravity simulator was cycling through random settings every few seconds, causing crew members to bounce between the ceiling and floor like confused rubber balls. Chief Engineer Thompson was floating near the control panel, frantically pressing buttons while slowly rotating in place. "The override isn't responding," he shouted, just as the gravity reversed and sent him plummeting toward the ceiling. "Someone needs to reach the manual shutdown, but it's behind that force field." Marcus looked at the crackling energy barrier protecting the main control system. "That's a Class 7 containment field. It would take hours too." He was interrupted by Zara, who had walked directly through the force field as if it wasn't there. Her ears were glowing faintly, and sparks of energy danced between her fingertips. "Ethereal bioelectric manipulation," she called out, her hands moving over the control panel with practiced efficiency. "We're naturally resistant to most energy fields, side effect of our empathic abilities." "That's incredibly useful," Marcus said, watching her work. "Also slightly terrifying." "Most useful things are," Zara replied, pulling what looked like a crystalline circuit board from the panel. "There. Your simulator was trying to recreate the gravity conditions inside a black hole. Probably not ideal for recreational purposes." The gravity stabilized at normal Earth levels, and the floating crew members settled gently to the deck. Chief Thompson approached them, shaking his head in amazement. "Commander, I don't know how to thank you. We could have been dealing with gravitational anomalies for hours." "Just doing my job," Zara said, then paused. "Though I should mention that your simulator seems to have developed a mild case of artificial intelligence. It was trying to compose poetry about the nature of mass and acceleration." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Was it good poetry?" "Terrible, but very enthusiastic." That evening, Marcus found himself in the observation deck, staring out at the swirling colors of hyperspace. The view never got old. Reality stretched and compressed into ribbons of light that danced past the reinforced windows like cosmic aurora. "Couldn't sleep either." Zara's voice came from behind him. He turned to find her approaching, her long ears drooping slightly with fatigue. "The lab's too quiet after today's excitement. I keep expecting something else to develop sentience and start reciting bad verse. I know the feeling, my quarters." She paused, settling into the chair beside him. "My ears pick up too much. The crew's dreams, their worries, their late-night snacks. Did you know that Ensign Patterson has recurring nightmares about being chased by sentient vegetables? That explains why he always looks nervous in the hydroponics bay." They sat in comfortable silence, watching hyperspace flow past like a river of liquid starlight. Marcus found himself stealing glances at Zara, noting how the cosmic light played across her features and made her ears seem to shimmer with their own inner radiance. "Marcus," she said softly, "yes. Thank you, for this morning, I mean, for not making it weird when you found me in your bed." "Well," Marcus said, grinning, "I figured if I was going to be court-martialed for accidental diplomat kidnapping, I might as well enjoy the conversation first." The ion storm hit the meridian like a cosmic tantrum, turning the ship's sensors into a light show that would have been beautiful if it wasn't potentially lethal. Captain Morrison's voice crackled over the intercom, fighting through electromagnetic interference that made him sound like he was gargling plasma. "All hands, prepare for emergency maneuvers. We've got a Class 9 ion storm approaching from the port bow. Navigation is compromised, and we're flying blind through a field of charged particles that could turn us into the galaxy's most expensive fireworks display. Marcus grabbed the nearest handhold as the ship lurched, his coffee mug launching itself across his quarters in a graceful arc that ended with a tragic splat against the wall. "Well, there goes my morning caffeine ritual," he muttered, watching brown liquid drift in zero-G droplets, "and possibly my will to live." The emergency klaxon was doing its best impression of a banshee with a migraine, and Marcus could hear crew members running through the corridors, their voices mixing with the general chaos of a ship trying not to become cosmic debris. He made it to the bridge just as another wave of charged particles washed over the hull, causing the lights to flicker and the artificial gravity to hiccup. Lieutenant Rodriguez was at the helm, his knuckles white as he gripped the controls. "Captain, I can't see anything through this interference," Rodriguez called out, sweat beading on his forehead. "The navigation computer is giving me readings that suggest we're simultaneously in 3 different locations, none of which appear to exist in our current dimension." "Stellar cores," Captain Morrison muttered. "Engineering, what's our status?" Chief Thompson's voice came through the comm, accompanied by the sound of sparking circuits and what might have been creative profanity. "We're holding together, but barely. The storm's playing havoc with our electrical systems. Half our backup systems are convinced they're actually teapots." "Teapots?" Marcus asked. "Long story, has to do with an experimental AI we installed last month. Apparently, it defaults to kitchen appliances when confused." The ship shuddered again, and Marcus watched the viewscreen flicker between static and brief glimpses of the storm raging outside. Lightning arced between clouds of ionized gas, creating patterns that looked almost like neural networks firing in slow motion. "Captain," came Zara's voice from the communication station. "I might be able to help with the navigation problem." Morrison turned to her, hope flickering in his eyes. "Commander, right now I'd welcome help from a psychic space dolphin if it could get us through this storm." "Not quite a dolphin," Zara said, her ears beginning to glow with that same faint light Marcus had seen during the gravity simulator incident. "But my people's empathic abilities aren't limited to emotions. I can sense the crew's psychological state, help coordinate their responses during the crisis." "You mean like a telepathic air traffic controller?" Marcus asked. "More like a mood-based GPS system," Zara replied, closing her eyes and extending her consciousness throughout the ship. "I can feel everyone's fear, their uncertainty. If I can channel calm through the crew, help them focus, we might be able to navigate through this storm using pure coordination instead of instruments." The captain nodded grimly. "Do it, Commander, whatever you need." What followed was the most bizarre emergency response in Meridian's history. Zara's consciousness spread through the ship like a warm blanket, her empathic abilities touching each crew member and gently guiding their emotional state. In engineering, Chief Thompson suddenly found himself humming while he rewired critical systems. On the bridge, Lieutenant Rodriguez's hands steadied as an inexplicable sense of confidence flowed through him. "This is incredible, Doctor," Martinez whispered from the medical station. "I can feel her presence in my mind, but it's not invasive. It's like having a really good friend standing right behind you, making sure you don't panic." Marcus watched in amazement as the chaos on the bridge transformed into orchestrated efficiency. Every crew member was still doing their job, but now they were doing it with the kind of synchronization usually reserved for hive minds or very well-rehearsed dance troupes. "Rodriguez, adjust heading by 2 degrees starboard," Zara said, her voice carrying an odd harmonic quality as she channeled her abilities. "Thompson, reroute power through the secondary conduits." "Doctor." "Martinez, prepare the medical bay for minor electrical burns, and what I'm fairly certain will be at least 3 cases of motion sickness." "How can you possibly know that?" Marcus asked. "Ensign Patterson is thinking very hard about those sentient vegetables again," Zara replied, a note of strain entering her voice. It's affecting his inner ear balance. For the next hour, the Meridian danced through the ion storm like a leaf on a cosmic wind, guided by the combined intuition of its crew and the empathic coordination of one very determined ethereal diplomat. Lightning crashed around them, charged particles hammered their shields, and the ship's computer continued to insist that it was, in fact, a teapot. Finally, they emerged from the storm into the blessed calm of normal space. The stars shone steady and bright, no longer filtered through layers of ionized chaos. The crew let out a collective cheer that echoed through the corridors, but Marcus noticed that Zara had collapsed in her chair, her ears drooping with exhaustion and her face pale as starlight. "Commander," he asked, moving to her side, "are you all right?" "Fine," she whispered, but her voice was shaky. "Just channeling calm to 37 panicked humans for an hour straight is a bit like trying to hug a supernova." Emotionally speaking. Before anyone could protest, Marcus scooped her up in his arms. She was lighter than he expected, and she didn't resist as he carried her toward the exit. "Where are you taking me?" she asked, her head resting against his shoulder. "Somewhere you can actually rest," Marcus said, surprising himself with his certainty. "My quarters. They're quiet, and after what you just did for all of us, you deserve better than regulation diplomatic furniture." "Marcus," she said softly, "I don't think I can make it back to my own quarters anyway. My ears feel like they've been used as lightning rods." "Then it's settled," he said, stepping into the corridor. "Besides, someone needs to keep an eye on you in case you start glowing again. For scientific purposes, of course." Despite her exhaustion, Zara managed a weak smile. "Of course, purely scientific." Zara woke to the scent of real coffee and the soft hum of Marcus's white noise generators, feeling more rested than she had in weeks. Her ears, no longer drooping with exhaustion, picked up the gentle sounds of Marcus moving quietly around his quarters, trying not to wake her. "You know," she said without opening her eyes, "for a species that claims to be non-telepathic, you humans are remarkably loud thinkers. You've been debating whether to wake me for the past 20 minutes." Marcus nearly dropped the breakfast tray he'd been preparing. "Sorry, I was trying to be considerate. Also, I may have been researching ethereal nutritional requirements for the past 3 hours, and I'm not entirely sure I got the mineral balance right in this synthesized kelp extract." "You made me kelp extract." Zara sat up, her ears perking with genuine surprise. "Marcus, that's actually very thoughtful and slightly terrifying. Most humans react to kelp extract the way your species typically responds to sentient vegetables." "Well, I figured after yesterday's psychic marathon, you needed proper nutrition, not just my experimental coffee blends." Marcus set the tray down carefully. "Though I should warn you, the replicator seemed confused by my requests and kept offering to make me a nice cup of tea instead." Zara took a sip of the kelp extract and blinked in surprise. "This is actually perfect. How did you know to add the selenium supplements?" "I may have hacked into the diplomatic medical database," Marcus admitted, looking sheepish, "just to make sure I wasn't accidentally poisoning you with good intentions." "You hacked a diplomatic database to make me breakfast." Zara's ears twitched with amusement. "That's either very sweet or a minor act of interstellar espionage." "Let's go with sweet. I prefer my crimes to be romantically motivated." They ate in comfortable silence, the white noise generators creating a peaceful buffer against the ship's constant emotional chatter. For the first time since boarding the Meridian, Zara's hypersensitive ears weren't being assaulted by the psychic noise of 37 different personalities all thinking at once. "Marcus," she said eventually, setting down her cup, "I need to tell you something. About yesterday, about sleeping here. It wasn't just exhaustion." "Oh?" Marcus tried to keep his voice casual, but she could hear his heart rate increase. "My people, we don't just pick up emotions through our ears. We need emotional sanctuary to truly rest. The constant input of other minds, their fears and hopes and dreams, it never stops. Even when we sleep, we're processing everyone else's psychological noise. Marcus nodded slowly. That sounds exhausting, like trying to sleep in the middle of a very chatty thunderstorm. Exactly. But here in your quarters something is different. The emotional resonance is calm, peaceful. It's like being in the eye of a psychic hurricane. She paused, her ears drooping slightly with vulnerability. I've never experienced anything like it. Nowhere else feels safe enough for real rest. Is that why you ended up here that first night? Marcus asked. Your subconscious was looking for somewhere quiet. I think so. My empathic abilities were overwhelmed after the negotiations, and somehow I found the one place on this ship where my ears could finally relax. She looked at him directly. The problem is, we're approaching the end of our mission. In 2 days, I'll be transferred back to my own ship, and you'll return to your crystalline organisms and your interpretive dance plants. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee as if it might contain the secrets of the universe. Zara, can I ask you something that might sound completely insane? Given that I just confessed to accidentally invading your bed because my ears have opinions about emotional feng shui, I think we're past worrying about sanity. What if we didn't have to go back to our separate ships? Zara's ears perked up with interest. What do you mean? I mean, what if we requested a joint assignment? The Ethereal Council and the Human Science Division have been talking about expanded cooperation programs, cultural exchange, shared research projects, that sort of thing. Marcus's words came faster as he warmed to the idea. I could apply for a position on an ethereal vessel, or you could request a long-term assignment to human space. We could be colleagues. Colleagues, Zara repeated, a smile tugging at her lips. Is that what we're calling it? Well, I didn't want to presume anything about interspecies relationship protocols, Marcus said, his cheeks reddening. For all I know, suggesting anything more than professional cooperation could be a diplomatic incident. Marcus, Zara said gently, my people have a saying, the heart needs no translator. I think what we have here transcends diplomatic protocols. So you'd be willing to consider a more permanent arrangement? I'd consider it essential, Zara said. I've spent years thinking I was designed to be alone, that my empathic abilities would always isolate me from others. But with you, I don't feel alone. I feel home. Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. Then we'll make it work. I'll talk to Captain Morrison about extending our joint mission parameters. You can speak with the Ethereal Council about cultural exchange opportunities. There's just one problem, Zara said, her ears twitching with mischief. If we're going to be spending extended time together, we'll need to do something about the sleeping arrangements. I don't think I can go back to those regulation diplomatic quarters. Well, Marcus said, grinning, I suppose we could requisition some larger quarters, something with enough space for both my scientific equipment and your need for emotional sanctuary. And better coffee facilities, Zara added. If I'm going to be adapting to human caffeine culture, I want to do it properly. Deal, though I should warn you, once you start down the path of specialized coffee equipment, there's no going back. I have friends who have devoted entire rooms to espresso machines. Your species is wonderfully obsessive, Zara said, laughing. I think I'm going to fit right in. Later that day, they stood together in the observation deck, watching the stars wheel past in their ancient patterns. The Meridian would dock at Starbase 7 in 36 hours, where crew transfers and new assignments would be processed. But for the first time since boarding, neither of them was thinking about their individual destinations. Marcus, Zara said softly, yes. Thank you, for the breakfast, for the sanctuary, for making me feel like I don't have to navigate the universe alone. Thank you for trusting me with your rest, Marcus replied, and for saving us all from that iron storm, and for making me realize that the best discoveries aren't always in the lab. Though I do want to meet that interpretive dance plant someday, Zara said. "I'm curious about its artistic process. I'll introduce you. Fair warning, though, it's very opinionated about lighting design." As they watched the stars, both of them felt the profound shift that occurs when two solitary travelers realize they no longer have to journey alone. The universe suddenly seemed less vast, less empty, filled instead with the possibility of shared discoveries and quiet mornings with perfect coffee. Somewhere in the distance, Marcus's research computer chimed with an incoming message about crystalline organisms. But for once, Dr. Marcus Chen wasn't thinking about science. He was thinking about how sometimes the most important discoveries happen not in laboratories, but in the space between sleep and waking, where two hearts learn to find home in each other's presence. And in the diplomatic quarters 3 decks down, a regulation bed sat empty, wondering where its occupant had gone and why the room suddenly felt so much colder.